I'm Aryeh Schwartz alongside Hall of Famer Rachel Galligan, and welcome to the Winsidr show where it's all about the W. The season is here with a handful of games in the book. It's time to reflect on what we've seen and share some thoughts on what we think we will see. So Rachel, it's time. Let's cut to the basket. Welcome back to the show. Honored, glad, excited. The season's here. I'm back in the booth with Rachel. I'm hyped. I know you're hyped. Give me a one-word thought to the first week of action in the WNBA.
Just whirlwind. It's like everything's happening really fast. So much happens. And with this, especially with this condensed schedule, there's games every day, and it just feels very rapidly things are happening. And I personally am like, okay, I'm just trying to keep up. Trying to recap everything that happened. I mean, 5 days ago feels like so much has even changed from there. But I think one word, gosh, that's a tough one. I'm just going to say whirlwind, just because of it feels very rushed and chaotic. But I guess that's going to be the tone of the season this year because of the condensed schedule and Olympic year. So we got to get used to it. Really impressed with the Aces, New York, Indiana. Obviously has one of the toughest starts for a bunch of rookies, and for Caitlin Clark and company, that's a tough start to the season to have to play 4 games against 2 of the top 3 teams in the league. Really, really impressed with Minnesota Lynx. That's a fun team to watch. I think the Chicago Sky are a fun team to watch. But yeah, those are just kind of some of my initial thoughts about things we've seen. But obviously, injuries. Fact that we're already kind of getting into hardship time in the first week of the season is disappointing. You had some injuries that even were in play before the season even began. So here we are in week 1, recapping week 1, and injuries are at play. I know we'll go over those here in a little bit, but what about you? What are your thoughts? How are you feeling after the first week of action?
Honestly, if I'm being real, it was a better product than I expected. And not maybe expected's the wrong word. I feel like often of recent seasons with such a rushed training camp, it kind of feels like the first couple games are a training camp. And yes, there were certain teams that it definitely felt like they're still trying to find their groove and get it working. But that said, I mean, New York actually looked cohesive. Dallas at times before the injury plague hit them looked cohesive and looked more like a team that we've been wanting to see. Minnesota, I think, was a surprise that, they gelled quicker and that all these different pieces are fitting together. Obviously, there's going to be bumps in the road. They're just 2 games in, but I thought that was impressive. And then also, if I'm being real, Connecticut, a team that I has been very widely on record saying that's the team that has the question mark for me. Are they going to stay at this top level that they have for years, or are they finally going to have that year where they drop off? So far, it's looking like that drop-off year is not this year. Yep. We don't need to run down all the scores, but I do want to kind of run down the injury bug that has plagued the W. And it's funny because, I guess funny is the wrong word, but it's interesting. So often we have the hardship signings early in the season because of overseas players. This team doesn't have enough players here, right. Or overseas injuries. When this year, it's truly been injuries happening in the W early on. Talk about the Dallas Wings, Natasha Howard, Satu Sabli, Jaylen Brown, and Kalani Brown. I mean, this team is essentially down to half their team.
Yeah, it's a completely...
Like, what?
Completely. This is not what they envisioned to be starting the season with. But you did bring up a great point, the prioritization. I mean, years past, it's been interesting to have players that would be joining next week or even, a few days late. It has been nice to see complete teams from the start, even into preseason games, Yeah, I think that will help these teams get cohesive. And as teams and coaches continue to figure out their rotations, that will happen much quicker. The fact that you've got everybody on the team, the healthy players, the stars are here. So that has been a nice thing to be able to, just observe and get a handle on. I do think it's evident, especially some of the turnovers, some of the chemistry issues. And I don't say issues in a bad way. It's expected. I mean, the training camp is so short. we were talking about it earlier this week. I wish there was a way these teams could get consecutive weeks together in the preseason to practice and figure out rotations and get their legs under them. I think I see a lot of players that are still getting their legs underneath them. A lot of the ones who didn't go overseas or play in a league during the off season. And so it's just, you can see everybody is getting back into it. Some teams are further along than others, which is, again, completely expected when you have the movement and the changes, the rookies who are thrown into the league. Literally, we're playing a college basketball game, just a few weeks ago. So, yeah, I mean, it's expected. I think you saw a lot of turnovers with some of these teams. I know, like, we're going to talk about the Seattle Storm. That's a team that, they're 1-2. There's no panic button, in my opinion. It's just going to take time for this team to get cohesive and figure out what their identity is. That's a word that I like to use right now this time of year, is what is the identity of some of these teams? And I don't think really, I mean, you can't know that about any of them. You could argue for Vegas, you could argue one for New York, but it's still early. Every team is different. Even if you're running it back with the same crew from the year before, every year is different in terms of what is that identity. But yeah, the injury bug, I mean, the most glaring to me being Dallas. I mean, that hurts really, really, really bad in terms of Satu, and just that it's just hard. I think it's going to be a really rocky start for the Wings. Hopefully, this is a team that can get some, and I said it I think it was one of the last shows that we did, or maybe one of our Bleacher Report shows where I said the Dallas Wings are interesting because this is an important year for them. Whether are they a pretender or are they a contender? It's going to be hard to be in contention when you're at 50%, but I do see opportunity with this team. And so there you've got young players, rookies who are getting massive minutes. Who's going to be the one that elevates throughout the course of the season and really contributes with this team? Well, we don't know that yet. So I don't know. There's some of my initial thoughts. In terms of the injury bug, I think the Brittany Griner thing, I've been impressed with Phoenix and how they've been able to kind of manufacture.
Well, let's run down who else got injured before we.
Sorry, I'm rambling.
That's what happens. We haven't been in the booth so long. So NECA gets hurt in Seattle, but they have depth in that. So that's not, and like you said, Seattle's a team where, if I'm being real, I didn't see that much of a jump from their preseason game to those first two games against Minnesota. It seemed, and like you were saying, finding identity, I think that goes hand in hand with a longer training camp. When you have that longer training camp, you give players the opportunity to learn systems, to really gel with each other. You see less turnovers during the season, and you're going to see a better product on the court. Chelsea Gray for the Aces, obviously we knew that coming in. I'm not as worried about that, but I think it is going to be hard to. All right, one question, Rachel. Can the Aces repeat if Chelsea Gray's out the whole season?
Yes.
Okay. Don't even expand on that. That's just, we're going to clip that and use that all over now. Brittany Griner's hurt, and you started to touch on this, so I'll kind of let you go from there. But my only thoughts are, I mean, they're just going to shoot it and shoot it and shoot it until she comes back. And then when she comes back, they're probably still just going to shoot it and shoot it and shoot it.
They want to get up shots. I mean, this is a dream for some of those players and the system that they're running. I mean, but do we know a timeline for Griner? It's a few weeks.
They said like 3 to 6 weeks, 4 weeks, something like that. I'm not concerned about it. My concern is two things. One, it's a foot injury, and this is a team that's going to want to run a lot to get up a lot of shots. So that obviously is a question mark. Two, the question mark is kind of honestly how she fits in this team. Like, obviously, if you're just pulling everyone out and letting it rip, I get that, like, having someone to clean up some of those rebounds is great and all, but I don't know. I was going into the season saying they don't have a big other than Brittany Griner. And now they're just like, looking like a legit team with Natasha Mack starting at the 5.
And Mack is going to have to contribute. I mean, and you can see this team kind of rallying around her and giving her that confidence, and Griner rallying around her and giving her that confidence. I mean, and you can kind of like, it's expected that at first it's going to feel a little bit like uncomfortable or there's that pressure. But I think Mack has done a good job for being this early in the season, and there's so much on her shoulders. But the truth of Phoenix, Kalia Copper. I mean, is that the biggest free agency signing. Everyone has been kind of like saying that NECA was, but I'm telling you, Kahleah Copper, granted, again, I know we're like 3 games into the season, putting up 38 points, a career high. She's going to have to do that, especially with Griner's not being in the equation. Taurasi will get hot some days, won't other days. She'll miss a third of the season, but Copper's going to have to be that steady, consistent force. And almost, I don't want to say it's like on the wings of like a Jewel Lloyd last year, who had to get up not that type of pressure, because there's obviously more around her, in my opinion. But like Copper could have a phenomenal year, one of her most productive offensive years, in my opinion. But yeah, I mean, it'll be interesting when Griner is back and does return. You hope that it's a relatively seamless transition, but she's going to have to get her legs underneath her. She's going to have to, get used to playing with this new system and all these new players. So that will take some time. But your hope is that, right, with having Mac in the interior and at least serving as that role, it's not a huge, crazy change. I mean, they had Sophie Cunningham playing at like the 4.
They had Rebecca Allen playing at the 5 at certain points. I mean, the thing, none of these players, Rachel, have ever been on a team where you've had this much of a green light.
Yeah.
And I don't think that any player on this team, maybe Natasha Cloud from that championship Washington Mystics team, but I don't think there's a player on this team that's ever been on a team with this much shooters. Like, everybody is a shooter on this team. And whether it's a drive cut shot, whether it's a pull up, whether it's whatever, they have such a variety of ways of getting points. This is a fun team. And I completely agree. If we're doing power rankings in terms of off-season moves, 100% number 1 right now has to be Kahleah Copper going to the Phoenix Mercury. Another one I want to talk to you about, Azrae Stevens been injured in LA.
Yeah.
Honestly, great for Cam Brink, who's been doing a pretty good job. I was saying this to you maybe a couple weeks ago, that for as much hype and attention that this draft class and March Madness got, it almost felt like at times Cam Brink was flying under the radar to a degree. Obviously, there's a lot of notoriety and attention, but she's not pulling, the social media followers and the headlines of an Angel Reese or a Caitlin Clark. So she kind of was able to skirt under that and is really succeeding right now in LA.
Yeah, I mean, and the best thing about Cam Brink is she's going to get that opportunity, being thrown into the rotation, playing heavy minutes. I mean, 20 to 25 minutes a game. She's only going to continue to get comfortable. 2 games into the season, averaging 7 points, 5 rebounds. I mean, a lot of these rookies are struggling with foul trouble early on. That's always been a thing with Cam Brink and her career throughout college. That was something she struggled with. But like Caitlin Clark's struggling with it. I mean, a lot of these rookies are struggling to, not foul. So learning to play the game without fouling or things like that are going to be a learning curve. I'm not concerned with that with Brink, but I think the thing I'm most excited about is obviously LA is rebuilding. They're rebuilding through the draft, and you're going to watch a lot of these young players come in here and get massive opportunities. This is going to be a year for Brink that there's going to be highs, there's going to be lows, but her growth, this will be one of the biggest years of growth for Cameron Brink in her career. And it's only going to translate, in my opinion, over to next year with her confidence. And yeah, I agree. I think she is a little bit under the radar. I think probably LA, it's because of probably LA and where they're at and where the franchise is at. But I don't know. I was impressed. And let's talk about, while we're talking about LA, let's talk about Dearica Hamby. Holy, like, revenge season. I mean, and maybe it's because she's playing against the Aces, and obviously we all know the story there. But I mean, Hamby is on a absolute mission this year. You can see it on her face. You can see it the way she's running the floor. You can see it in her fitness and her physique and like how locked and loaded and ready to go she is. And how great is it for a player like Cam Brink to learn the ways of the WNBA and the work ethic and what it takes from someone like Dearica Hamby. That's the dynamic I'm really excited about, those two.
Oh yeah, no, that's a great combo. Both of them have been playing amazing, and yeah, Hamby has just been ridiculous. I mean, Hamby's like, I don't know if there's a meme to, I'm sure there is somewhere, but like she's just focused from like, it's almost like the rest of the team's laughing, having a good time, and she's just like eyes on the court, ready to ball. We talked on this, another rookie. So we're past the injuries. I'm talking rookies now. We kind of perfect segue with the Cam Brink talk. Well, I guess let's talk Caitlin Clark real briefly. If I'm being completely honest, no hate, no disrespect, because we've done so much and there's been so much Caitlin Clark coverage. I'm like, can we talk about somebody else? I'm
No, but
sure.
we need to touch on it for sure.
Oh no, I think we definitely need to touch on it. All right, 3 questions for you when it comes to Caitlin Clark, and I'll just let you ramble, and then I'll just interrupt you when I disagree. 1, a lot of people were marking this team to be out of the lottery dungeon. Do you feel any differently now, 3 games in? 2, Caitlin Clark, what have you been most impressed with? And then, I mean, the obvious, she's been struggling at times in different things. And then, side note, real quick, you talked about, I know I'm just listing questions. You talked real briefly about rookies adjusting to professionals when it comes to fouls and the rookies getting in foul trouble. At some point, sprinkle in there why you think that is, because from my understanding, there's more physicality allowed in the W than, let's say, in college. So I'm curious why, in my mind, in a simpleton's mind, it's like, oh, the rules are more lax, so there should be less fouling, but it's kind of being the opposite. So here's 15 questions. Answer as you see.
And I'm like, where do I start?
Yeah.
I'm happy that we have 6 fouls in the W. Especially this last week. I think it's been important. My initial thoughts on Caitlin Clark. I mean, welcome to the WNBA moment, playing New York Liberty and Connecticut Sun 2 times each in your first 4 games. So I think the Fever, I have a lot of concerns as the Fever as a whole. Is it up to a point where I'm like pushing a panic button or expect anything more? I think if you expect more than what we saw from the Indiana Fever, you're fooling yourself. This team has a lot to figure out. This team has a lot to figure out chemistry-wise. They have a lot to figure out rotation-wise. They have a lot to figure out just being comfortable in the game. And I'm not just talking Caitlin Clark. Leah Boston has looked uncomfortable this past week. Nalissa Smith has not. I mean, a couple games really struggled. And we saw the rotations really switch up between Erica Wheeler or Kelsey Mitchell. And so it's a giant question mark there. And you're doing it with players who are young. And where does Katie Lou Samuelson fit into this equation as one of the veterans who's supposed to kind of be that steadying force? But I'm not panicked about the Fever. It's just going to be, I'm going to have such a close eye, and we will have every opportunity to watch it because they're on TV 700,000 times. But just going to be, they're getting exposed for who they are and where they are at this moment. This is a team that's been in the lottery for what, like 8 years now, 6 years, 6 years. I mean, it's been forever. It's going to take a monumental effort to get out of it, and it's going to take a lot of growth, and you're going to have to go through a lot of growing pains. Caitlin Clark, I mean, it's hard. I mean, she's being utilized in a different way. I don't think which is to be expected, right? You can't think that she's just going to play the way she got to play in Iowa and get to do the same thing with Indiana. That's not how this is going to go. So how is she utilized? I mean, is she being asked to facilitate more, or is she being asked to go be a scorer? Is she playing on the ball more? Is she playing off the ball more? Every game has been, in my opinion, really different in terms of the way she was being utilized because they're trying to figure it out. The turnovers are the biggest thing, averaging about 7 turnovers per game. Everyone talked about the one where she had 10. Some of them, and again, some of them are just welcome to the WNBA, you've got to adapt. But I feel like some of these turnovers, like her teammates don't know how to handle her passing yet.
Yeah, I've noticed that too.
She could be leading someone to the rim in the open floor and see something, and it's not. And I'm not saying she's like too good of a passer for them. It's just when you have that connection, that point guard to forward or whatever, there has to be a chemistry there that can only be established and developed over time and consistency with playing with one another. And with a week-long training camp, a couple preseason games, that can't exist now. So I feel like there's just a little bit of a disconnect in terms of players getting comfortable understanding her and the way she plays and the way she sees the floor and the way she facilitates. Yes, some of these turnovers are legitimate mistakes on her half. There's no doubt about that. But so I think you have a combination of that. I think she's trying to create shots. She's trying to open up the floor and get everybody involved, but it's just going to take time. I'm not concerned. It was nice to see her get going a little bit from the perimeter, where she hit 4. she hit 4 in 2 of the games. Really struggled in that game against New York where she went 1 for 7. But you can tell that she's getting more and more comfortable every time she steps out on the floor. She's got the weight of the world and pressure on her shoulders, that's for sure. And she's a rookie, so, and she's the biggest name in sports. So people are going to make it a little bit extra hard on her at times with setting screens or, it's going to come with the territory. So I feel good about where Clark is. I'm not panicked. I'm not freaked out. I'm not overly high. I'm not overly low. It's just I'm excited to watch what this Fever team can potentially do throughout the course of the season. Like where we are today versus where they're going to be 2 months from now is going to be completely different, in my opinion. Or it should be. If not, we've got bigger problems at our hands.
Well, I'm just going to warn everyone listening to this episode, be careful, because if we've learned anything, tweeting early in the season will get you called out, and receipts will be shown by WNBA teams and their players and their fans. So watch out if you're trashing them. Kate Martin obviously deserves a hat tip, doing her thing in Vegas. Kia Jackson also, we kind of skipped over her a little bit in LA. But I kind of want to talk about them a little bit more in depth once we get to an LA episode, once we have a little bit more to talk about in LA. Angel Reese, though, a player who I've been very vocal. I'll sit here and I'll say it. What I think I thought she was going to be worse than she has performed so far. What I think she's been doing so far this season in her professional career has been good. Like, can't no two ways about it. I think she's found a way to do what she does best and kind of hone in on that and not try and expand, not try and do anything other than she can do. And it's not even necessarily that she's doing everything she did in college or whatever. It's she's limiting her game down and doing, I don't want to say the basics, but she's doing what she knows she can succeed at. I'm talking about hustle plays. I'm talking about strength. I'm talking about just, exhausting the opponent and crashing the boards. And then taking advantages when she can to get shots up. And I'll be the first to say it, because I was very vocal saying I think she wasn't going to have, wasn't going to be as good. She's impressed me so far.
She has to. She has to. I mean, that she was picked up in the perfect scenario. And I'm not saying that she wouldn't do this on any other team, but like the Chicago Sky, first and foremost, I have been very critical of this franchise, and I'm sure I will continue with it at times. But I got to say, I'm impressed with what I've seen this first week. From just an energy and an effort standpoint, this team really seems to like one another. This team seems to really play hard. They have so much energy. They've got some dogs on there that I like Mabry and even Kennedy Carter coming in, and how dynamic she's been in the league. I mean, what a tough start to her career, but has been so fun to watch. And then you've got some edge and personality on this Chicago Sky team, and it feeds off of Teaspoon, who I think is doing a really good job with this team. Again, it's early on. We'll see how, we're talking about this in a few weeks, but they're not going to be a contender. But I can tell I love watching the Sky play because of just the effort and the hustle and the energy and the confidence. They're playing confidently, and that comes from Teaspoon. And you can tell that this franchise picked up Angel Reese, and they instilled in her from the jump the expectation and what we need you to do, what we believe you can do. You're being brought here to contribute and average close to hopefully a double-double. That's the type of production we need from you right now, is averaging 11 points, 8.5 rebounds. I've been really impressed with the Sky team in general. And again, it's sometimes, it's like sometimes you watch these games and you go through the course of a season and you're like, there's like some teams you're just like, oh, I don't want to watch this today. Or you don't, naturally it's not as fun to watch. I'll be the first to admit that there's some teams I felt like that. But now, like, I'm excited to watch the Sky this year. And I'm a little surprised by that. I wasn't sure what this product was going to look like. But Angel Reese, I'm not surprised because of the need, what they needed her to be and what they needed her to do. If she'd been picked up by Vegas, this would look a lot different for sure. But it's the perfect scenario for a player like her to come in and have a phenomenal year. And you really start to ask the question with some of these rookies and some of the situations that they've been put into just collectively as a team. Like this Rookie of the Year race really up for grabs. I mean, who knows what happens.
If you're writing off the Rookie of the Year race already for Caitlin Clark, you are going to be sorely mistaken. And that's people who have been voters talking to you. But I completely agree. And also Dana Evans, another player adding that spark, adding that fire. The Chicago Sky, and I'll say this. In years past, there's been teams, not even specifically the Chicago Sky, because I don't think they've been that team, but there's been teams in years past where it's almost like they've accepted that they're going to be in the lottery before the season begins and throughout the whole season. Maybe sometimes, the first week or two, they don't have that vibe to them. But there's always teams that throughout the season, it feels like they've accepted they're going to be in the lottery. That's not Chicago. That's not going to be LA. I'm looking around this league and I'm going,
no, this feels very way too early. I know, but I understand what you're saying. Like, I can't look right now. The team that is flailing the most after 1 week, this will change, everybody, but the team that looks the most disheveled and flailing around and like question is the Fever.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, maybe you could make an argument at times for
Seattle,
Washington, maybe Seattle, but how do you say that about the Fever when they're playing two of the top teams in the league?
Yeah.
In the start that they had, like what are the Fever going to look like in a couple weeks when they're playing the Chicago Sky, when they get a chance to go play the Atlanta Dream? So it's kind of hard, but I agree. I'm encouraged and I'm excited because there's some dogs top to bottom. There's great players. And I know we say this all the time, but like there are players out there trying to set the tone and clearly on a mission with some of these teams and the energy and I don't know. I'm excited to watch all of this play out. And can a team like Chicago keep that momentum and confidence and energy? They're going to need to, they have to have that night in and night out to be competitive. They're going to have to. Can they sustain that for the course of the season? Because they're not just good enough to go out there and beat people,
Yeah. No, so two things that popped into my head, and then we'll log off for the day. Well, actually, we had real quick Patreon questions. We'll get to that right after. Two things that popped into my head that I'm just going to pose as a question. You can say I'm not replying or whatever, but one, how we've seen this, I would say, seismic change in the league of players not going overseas as much. And I'm curious, and that's a great thing, right? Obviously, less injuries, we can get that product back here, but it's never perfect. There's going to be aspects where there's going to be a negative of it. And I think one of the negatives is, we talk about this all the time, WNBA players take a long time to develop sometimes because the season's so short, because of injuries, because of going overseas and being required to do other things. But overseas grows people's game. So I'm curious how over the next 5 years, youth or young players in the league's development is going to be impacted or not impacted by not going overseas. There's positives to it. There's negatives to it. I think the positives outweigh the negatives, but I am curious, just as a thought experiment, to think about that. Yeah, I had one other question, but now I'm blanking.
I'll just echo what you said. I think the positives outweigh the negatives. There's got to be a plan in place, though. I mean, you can't just go coach on one of these college teams or be on the college team bench and not be like, which a lot of players are starting to do, right? They're starting to kind of jump into be an assistant or a player development coach on a college team, or they're doing some broadcasting, or like there has to be a plan. You can't just obviously take no one's just taking that much amount of time off. But I think that where it could be really beneficial is the individual development. If you get linked up with a phenomenal trainer who has a plan in place that's locked in with your franchise and your coaches, and you're able to really, really improve individually, that's when you get better in the offseason individually. And some players are going to invest more time into that and other players are not. Some players are going to go overseas still and find a way to make that work. I think there's benefits of just having your legs under you and being in game shape. You've got some players now who didn't play this offseason. It's going to take a while to get back into game shape. The only way to get into game shape is play games. How does a league like, Athletes Unlimited play into this equation? Does that help the equation a little bit, just to, get out there and play for a few weeks and get some consistency? So there's options now. And I think that more than anything, that's a good thing. I am always concerned about the WNBA's plan for development. We throw it around, but like, when do they develop? Like, how you can't individually develop during the course of a season, especially a year like this when you're basically playing or traveling every other day. So that development has to take place in the off season, but then they're not together in the off season. They get a week together in training camp. So like really there has to be an external plan with an elite trainer and a plan in place that is really taking place in the off season. It's going to be interesting to see, who really dives into that and what does that look like in this new landscape.
Yeah, and I was just thinking how that kind of all ties back to maybe high turnovers, high fouls, sloppy play early in the season. All right, so we got some mailbag questions. These are specifically and strictly from our Patreon subscribers. So if you haven't already, subscribe on patreon.com/Winsidr. Get cool content. And you get to do cool things like this. And you get to join our Discord channel where you can chat all things W with our team. All right. Is Emma Cannon really the long-term replacement for Candace Parker, or do the Aces have something else planned? I assume that was a question for coming into the season more than currently once the season has begun. I think the Aces are keeping their options open, but I think they're very, very happy and set where they are.
Anything's possible, but with her experience and what she brings to this team, I could see it sticking.
How do you think Dallas manages to do in the first half without Satu? Well, I would say that question gets a lot harder now that they're missing Natasha Howard, Jaylen Brown, and Kalani Brown, possibly. They are. It's going to be a dogfight. Aryeh is going to really have to, carry the team, and other players are going to have to step up. It's time for Maddie Siegrist. It's time for Lou Lopez. The other players.
Who can be that person? I think they're going to be lucky to be 500.
Yeah, and that drop off is going to give an option to some other teams. Talking about the Dreams, the Sparks, the Fever, all these other teams possibly make the playoffs. Our thoughts on the charter announcement / situation. Well, I, for lack of a better term, would call it a S show. Look, end of the day, I'm trying not to swear for the children who are listening. At the end of the day, it seemed like whether or not this was planned out or whether this was planned out years, months in advance, whatever, everything that happened seems to point in the direction that it was planned very last minute and done poorly, and even done poorly in a poor way. So it's classic WNBA, in my opinion, to finally do something positive, but completely trip over yourself trying to make the announcement. It was a complete embarrassment. Teams still aren't all chartered.
I think they're all. Didn't it come out that they're all supposed to be chartering by May 21st?
Something like that.
Don't mark my word on that, but I swear I saw something along lines of there was
a couple teams had to fly across country on the 19th and 20th. So it's
it feels here. I'm glad that we're here. I'm glad that we're here, and I can two things can exist at the same time. I can be appreciative and thankful that we made it to this point, but I can also be critical of just how it kind of got to this place. It just, to me, it feels reactive. This could have been rolled out completely differently, further in advance. There could have been more forward thought here, but I don't know. We don't know the inner workings of how this came to play. We don't know the inner workings of the financial deal. There's not enough information for us to know. So I'm holding back from going all in with being crazy critical, because I don't know, maybe finally you got someone that stepped up and was like, okay, it can happen now. And that was out of the league's control. I don't know. I'm thankful it's here. To me, I agree. It just feels reactive, and it should have been proactive.
And here's what I mean by that is, let's assume if I'm taking an assumptive role, it's because you have big stars and the hype of the tournament, and Angel Reese and Caitlin Clark and this new wave of players and women's sports is being pushed to the forefront. Slowly, it's happening. So then someone was like, oh, I want to get in on this. For the league not to be able during March Madness or earlier on to say, hey, I see. It was so obvious to everybody watching what was happening during that whole college season. At that point, Clark, if she's not coming in this year, she's coming in the following year. Where the hype is there. So it didn't matter. They should have already been at that stage.
It was going to be a year of videos of Caitlin Clark being harassed at the airport. Brittany Griner, which was crazy. It didn't happen last year with the whole Griner situation.
Insane.
I got to say it because it's unbelievable that it took, let's be honest, it took Caitlin Clark to get this to happen, because it was going to be night in and night out, videos of her at the airport, some, creepy people saying stuff. It was going to be a PR nightmare for the WNBA. So they had to figure it out. They somehow figured it out. Maybe someone stepped up. The moment she decided that she was declaring and she was going to the WNBA and she was not going to use her 5th year at Iowa, I feel like there should have been thought that people should have been thinking about.
There should have been a call that was made before that was like, hey, when she declares, if she declares this year, this is the deal. If she declares next year, that type of situation. And then
at least we have it. We're here, guys.
Yeah. Hey, totally. And arguably the best question anybody asked us: if you're drafting a team of WNBA mascots to play hoops, who are you picking first?
I like, what's the rabbit's name for Vegas?
Ace.
Is it Ace?
Not Ace?
I like. He kind of scares me a little bit. I like him though.
See, I'm gonna go new. I'm gonna go with the Valkyrie.
Ooh, but like,
she's got a sword. How are you gonna beat someone with a sword?
But have we seen the actual mascot?
Well, as of now, I'm just gonna say this: the things that go in advantage to me. You got hops because you're a bunny, right? I'm a Valkyrie. I have wings and a sword. So think of my wingspan. We've seen like a silhouette of what the Valkyrie is, so we have an idea. It's a strong woman with wings and a sword. Beat me. Try.
All right, fine. If that's the case, I'm taking it back. I'm not going to be the rabbit. I'm going to be Sky Guy, because at least I can like go toe to toe with my jetpack.
The jetpack is the jetpack. And honestly, hey, my thing is whatchamacallit, the Dallas Wings mascot really struggling, because what are you gonna do with hooves? How are you gonna shoot a ball? You can fly, but how are you gonna shoot the ball?
Yeah, it's obviously a battle in the air, my opinion. Like, I don't know, some of the ground-ridden mascots, you're struggling at that point. Good question. Yeah. I like that question.
Yeah. Ellie's great on the rebounds, though. Rachel, who's your GOAT?
Who do I want to say today? You know what? I'm going to stick with it, because we need to keep talking about her, because she didn't get the right farewell. Candace Parker.